We are wired, our brain is wired to protect us from discomfort and from danger. We think of our brains as being so sophisticated, and it's actually not. Believe it or not. It's actually very reptilian.
What is emotional avoidance and how does it show up in our thinking and our decision making?
What are you thinking? How are you feeling? How is it affecting in your body? And what's prompting your behavior? And of course, my brain is going to perseverate over it. Why? Because it A, wants me to be out of distress. B, it wants me to do whatever possibly I could do in order to repair this relationship because it's important to me. So, oh my gosh, I wish I had this insight like 30 years ago. Oh my gosh, I wish. Let's just be in it. Like, what does this feel like to be insecure? What does it feel like to have these set of thoughts? Right? What does it feel like in the body, in the mind? Right? What is it prompting me to do? It's prompting me to go then talk to somebody. No, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. One of the things that I want to emphasize, which is really important, and we don't practice this enough, which is
Michelle, what do you do and why is it important?
I wear a lot of hats. So it's a loaded question, but I will answer it. So I'm a psychotherapist. I treat, individuals, couples, families in my private practice. And then I teach as well. I teach a integrating mindfulness and clinical practice class at NYU at the spring semester, which I'm doing right now, which I absolutely love. Especially when I have this amazing cohort of students, which I have right now, which is always exciting. Um, I'm a mother, more formatively, to four kids, ages 23 to 15, three boys and a girl, and a mom to four dogs, too. So I have to mention
Uh,
that. And then I also have a nonprofit, which is called Thru My Eyes, and it offers free clinically guided videotaping to chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for children, for their children and loved ones. And lastly, I do a lot of writing. So I'm a blogger for Psychology Today. I also have a YouTube channel where I do weekly guided meditations. I offer them on YouTube. So again, a lot of hats.
what do you enjoy teaching the most? That's what I want to talk about.
What do I enjoy teaching the most? It's so interesting because I walked away from my class this week and I walk away really invigorated every single time I leave my classroom. And it's graduate students, so they're very kind of thirsty for knowledge and, clinical skills, and really they want to work better, more effectively and efficiently with their clients. Um, there's nothing like it, I have to tell you. It's so riveting to me just being there. And I really try to be very authentic and I really use myself. So a lot of examples that I give is from like my practice, and also I use a lot of personal examples. And it's so funny because when I get my evaluations, I'll have some people who say, "Oh, she talks a lot about, these examples, and I really want her to stick to like, conveying knowledge and research, right?" And then I have other students who will say exactly the opposite. Like, I love that she's so authentic and that she uses herself and that she's so present and, kind of emotionally attuned to us. So, you know how it goes, right? You can't please everybody.
No,
But I love, the course that I teach, which is, you may ask yourself, how does she teach 15 weeks of mindfulness? Like, you know, but it's amazing because I really apply it to different populations. So I have like 1 week on neuroscience and 1 week on spirituality and 1 week on diversity. It's so vast, but every single one of, I guess, the topics that I bring to the table, I really make sure, one, to use a modem of different types of educational tools, because some people are more auditory learners, some people are more visual learners. So I really try to tap into everybody's kind of strengths. So I'll do like a didactic piece, and then I'll do like maybe a little video, and then I'll do a little like exercise. Um, and I really want to make sure that they're walking away with tools because people like to have something, tangible to walk away with. So I give a lot of worksheets and, skills and tools that they can actually take and use, with their clients. And they really appreciate that.
So you speak on spirituality, you speak on neuroscience and all these other topics that fill up the 15 weeks. Is there a particular order that humans kind of grasp the information better and we're able to apply it more easily?
That's a really good question. No one has ever asked me that. I think you have to build a foundation, right? Because it's hard to apply it unless you have this foundation. So of course I first talk about the history of mindfulness, right? Because I want them to buy into it. Like, why are we learning about this? Why is it important? What's the point? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to benefit my clients? So first talking about the history, and then I talk about the benefits and the research behind that. And I talk about how it affects our brain and again the neuroscience behind it and the research behind it. And then I talk, right, it's really building this foundation. Then I talk about spirituality in general, and then I talk about selective populations, and then I talk about how to apply it to clinical practice. So there really is, just the way I described it, there is definitely a logical order for them to really understand the information. First, have this foundation for why are we learning this to begin with? Two, why is this important? Three, how do we apply it in our practice? And well, even more so, how does it apply to us in being practitioners and clinicians? And then how do we apply it to our practice? So I would say that is probably, kind of gradually how I deliver it.
Great. I love that. And
Yeah,
you did mention you like to give tangible tools, which I do want to talk about later on.
sure.
So we will definitely leave listeners with some of those. But before we get into that, what is emotional avoidance and how does it show up in our thinking and our decision making?
It shows up all the time, incessantly. And I think it's so hard to kind of summarize in kind of a short excerpt, but I will try my best. Um, we are wired, our brain is wired to protect us from discomfort and from danger. And that is its primary function. Okay, that's according to, again, our physiology, how we are wired, based on our kind of neurophysiology. So, it's interesting because we think of our brains as being so sophisticated, and it's actually not. Believe it or not. It's actually very reptilian. Now, I'll give you an example. When you think about your PC, right? When you think about all the wonders that it could, right, do on a daily basis, whether it's dictating or kind of tapping into the internet. And again, I go on and on what our PCs could do, right? Like you literally sit here and you could almost like have the sense that it has a brain, that it's so sophisticated and it does all of these mechanisms. Like, where's the brain behind it? But of course, we know it's all in the wiring, right? In the networks, so to speak. And whatever we program our PC to do is whatever it does. Well, our brain functions very similarly. Okay, we have all these neural networks, and it's a conglomerate of our past, our experience, our genetics, and on and on and on and on. I could go on and on, our race, religion, identity, so forth and so on. And whatever we feed into those neural networks is actually what gets processed. Okay. And that's why it's so important to practice things like mindfulness, to practice things like, all the things that I obviously teach. Now, what ends up happening because of all of the things I just talked about is the discomfort sometimes comes in our negative emotions or uncomfortable emotions. What emotions are those? Sadness, disappointment, frustration, anger, rage, etc. So we do avoid those emotions in a lot of different ways, and all of us are different. Some of us deny, some of us repress, right? Some of us distract. There's so many different ways that we avoid it because of the discomfort. Like I said, our mind is constantly trying to avoid discomfort. Um, and when we avoid, when we distract, when we do all of those kind of fancy mind tricks to try to do it, it doesn't work. It just
Mm.
doesn't. Right. So if you tell me, oh, I'm so distressed, I had such a hard day, I got into an argument with my friend, whatever, right? And I'll say to you, just don't think about it. Get over it, right? Don't think about it.
Why
And
is
you'll say,
that so frustrating for us when someone tells us that?
why is it frustrating when somebody tells you to forget about it? Or why is
Right.
it, okay. Because why? Because we can't do it. We can't accomplish it. If
And
I
that's
tell
because of our hardwired programming.
yes, yes, because our mind will, let's say, you may say to me, um, my mind is ruminating and perseverating, and I can't get it out of my mind. And I feel so distressed and I feel so activated, and I can't get this thought out of my mind because I love this friend and I'm so distressed, and I don't want her to be angry at me, and I'm worried about the longevity of the relationship. Like, maybe she won't want to be my friend, whatever, right? And I'll say to you, okay, right? So just get it out of your mind. Like, forget about it. And you'll say, but I can't. I'll say, why not? You know what you'll say to me? Because my
Hmm.
friendship's important to me. So
Yes.
it always connects to our values. It always connects to our values. There's pain in values and values in pain. Okay. Whenever something rubs up your values, you're going to feel pain. And when you feel pain, something's rubbing up against your values. Okay. It's inevitable. But isn't that important information? Because if you say to yourself, gosh, I'm such a good friend that when I have conflict in my friendships, it causes me distress because friendship is such a higher order value of mine. And it's so formative and important to me. And of course, my brain is going to perseverate over it. Why? Because it A wants me to be out of distress. B, it wants me to do whatever possibly I could do in order to repair this relationship because it's important to me.
Can we take it a step further and ask, why is it important to you?
Absolutely. And you'd be able to tell me that, right? You'd say, well, we have this like connection, we support one another, right? Whatever it is. Yeah. And I would say to you, are relationships important in general to you? You probably would say yes, right? I would say, is your family relationships important to you or whatever? You'd say, actually, all relationships are important to me. I take my relationship pretty seriously because when I give of myself in relationships, I give all of myself. And that is the kind of person I am, right? Again, based on a value. What does that mean about you, right? Maybe another value of yours is thoughtfulness or kindness, right? Or loyalty or whatever, right?
Mm.
So it's always connecting to something. It's always connecting to something. And we need to know that about ourselves because instead of saying to yourself, I'm a horrible friend, and right, you could say, wow, I'm a caring friend. I'm a caring friend. And if I'm a caring friend, how do I want to approach this situation with my friend? Given there's this conflict or misunderstanding or whatever, right?
Mm.
It's a different approach. It's a different way of looking at things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to your original question, which is about emotional avoidance, our brain is constantly, constantly going to try to avoid the negative and uncomfortable emotions. It's just the way it is. Yeah. And it is actually very, very counterproductive. It doesn't work. It's counterproductive. Even if we try to accomplish it, it doesn't happen. And it just leads to suffering and distress and pain. That's all.
Mm. And what are your thoughts about the emotions being stored inside of the body?
Oh, yeah. There's there's a mind and body connection. There's a lot of kind of my practice, I use a lot of polyvagal theory, which is kind of a new kind of science around kind of our nervous system. Really trying to tap into connection rather than disconnecting. And yeah, our bodies, I always ask people, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? How is it affecting in your body? And what's prompting your behavior? Right? So you really want to look very holistically and openly and naturally in all of your systems, so to speak, because we're hardwired in that way, and it affects all of our systems. People will tell me, especially I work with a lot of people, obviously, who have anxiety, right? And they'll tell me, I'll say what happens when you get anxious, and they'll say, like, my heart rate, right? I have heart palpitations, right? I feel it in my chest, right? There's like this definitely constricting in my chest. Sometimes I get headaches, again, it affects gastroenterological issues, challenges. That comes up a lot for people, right? Their stomach hurts, right? And you'll see that with kids. It's very interesting. My stomach hurts. Ah, what's going on, right? Or I can't go to school because my stomach hurts. Yeah. So it shows up in our body. For some of us, it actually shows up in our body before, okay? And then once we have that physiological kind of symptom come up, it sends a message again to our brain, I'm anxious, and then the rumination starts, or the worrying starts, or the anxiousness starts, right? For some people, it's the opposite. Some people, right, they'll notice the thoughts first, and then it will compel and exacerbate kind of the physiological symptoms.
Mm.
Okay, but it's all connected. It's all connected. And I have to tell you, if we don't take care of it, okay, stress, anxiety, depression, all of those things wreak havoc on the body. I cannot even tell you. Literally, it takes years off of our life, and I'm not exaggerating. I just this week, I mean, I've never seen this before. It was like actually pretty scary. I saw this, young adult male. He developed, because of his stress from work, he developed alopecia. I don't know if you know what that is,
Mm.
but basically these bald spots where your hair falls out on his scalp. If you saw what I saw, I mean, it was scary. I mean, literally, he has patches of baldness all over his head. This is a young kid. And he said to me, oh, I wanted to get together with my high school friends and I'm not going because I'm embarrassed for them to see me like this.
Oh.
He went to the dermatologist and the dermatologist said, you might have had a propensity for kind of alopecia, but the stress is what induced it.
Mm.
And I literally, I mean, I wrote a letter for him. He has to like actually take a leave from work and work on the anxiety because he's going to end up literally bald, and again, it's not like bald where your hair is all, shaved off. It's patches, so it really does look, just, aesthetically looks very, very off-putting.
Okay, so someone does not want to get to that point and they started on this spiral of the negative thoughts, they're feeling the emotions in their body. What skills and steps can we take in order to manage and cope with the negative, uncomfortable emotions, instead of acting on them or instead of letting them ruminate?
So Jessica, that is my whole book. Gosh, if I could answer your question, I think I'd have a line outside my door. I mean, are you kidding me? I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. No, I'm just joking. But that's the magic question, right? Like, what do I do? And actually, I had another person who came in yesterday, a new person, and a father of two kids, actually, I'm sorry, three little kids, very little kids. And he said to me, like, my mind is just spiraling out of control. And so much so that it's impacting my ability to be present with my children. Like, I literally can't even focus. And he was really distressed about that, of course,
Yeah.
understandably, right? Um, there's so many things that we need to do when we're in a position like that, unfortunately. It includes, so I'll kind of summarize, it includes really a change of lifestyle to some extent. What do I mean by that? Again, because I'm talking about the mind body, it includes really health, right? So really taking care of what we put into our body in terms of food, right? Eating healthfully. It means exercising because when we have, again, when we have good cardiovascular, right, you know, and we're able to function optimally, right, there's less of a chance that we're going to, let's say, have these physiological kind of symptoms. And when we do, we'll be better able to manage them too. We're talking about a mindfulness practice. We're talking about, yeah, really skills and tools that I teach, both how do we manage it over time, right? Because again, when we think about integrating these skills, right? If I said to you, relax your mind right now, y- your brain doesn't work that way. It's not like a light switch. It's not
Mm.
like, okay, turn off, turn on, turn off. I mean, I wish, right? That would be really nice. It doesn't work that way. Your brain has to learn how to pace itself, how to slow down, how to process. When we're in a state of activation, our nervous system is activated. We're in, like, again, the flight, fight, freeze, fawn space.
Mm.
Our cortisol levels have increased, right? And we're spinning. Like, our nervous system is just so overactive that to get us back into a space, your mind needs to learn. And because we have neuroplasticity, our minds can learn, which is wonderful, right? Your mind needs to learn how to slow down during those moments, or even preemptively, how to prepare yourself to slow down if you're going to be in a stressful circumstance, let's say, because we know sometimes preemptively that we're going to be in a circumstance that's going to evoke us, right? Let's say, you have a family event with your mother-in-law and, the relationship is a little off, and that you get activated when you see your mother-in-law, right? You could prepare for that. Okay. But our brain, like I said, you have to teach your brain so that it knows how to kick it in when it needs to. And that
Mm.
takes practice, and that takes time, and that takes energy and intentionality, all of those things. It's not instantaneous.
How about for the people, their hard wiring involves feeling familiar with and feeling safe when they feel anxious because they grew up in an environment where that was home, that was familiar. So now that's what they know best. And so they unconsciously or subconsciously put themselves in situations where they feel anxious all the time.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point. And I actually had actually a majority of my session yesterday in my class, because I teach on Tuesdays, was about this. The utility of our adaptations. Now, what's an adaptation? An adaptation is kind of the way we cope with maybe a struggle, a challenge, or whatever since we're little. We have all of these adaptations. Okay. So, like you said, some people's go-to place, right, is to get anxious. Some people's go-to place is to get angry. Some people's go-to place is to get sad, or some people's go whatever, right? To distract or repress, disassociate. There's all different things we do. So we have to understand that about ourselves, because that is a coping mechanism. And the only way to rewire kind of all of those things, obviously, is to have awareness about it, right? And we have to relearn how to use effective coping skills so that we could relearn our experience and not repeat behaviors. Because part of what I was talking about the brain is we're hardwired to repeat behaviors. Okay. So there's this exercise I do with my class when I teach about the neuroscience, and it really explains it all. So I have them take a piece of paper and they have to fold it and fold it and fold it and fold it till they can't fold it anymore. Okay. And it's a little tiny piece of paper. And then I have them unfold it. And then ask them to fold it again. And then I'll ask them which way is easier to fold, the first time or the second time. And they'll say to me, of course, the first time, because you're making the creases. And then the second time, their creases already, right, present. I said, that's our brain. That's our brain. We develop these neural pathways, and our propensity is to repeat and repeat and repeat those pathways.
Oh, what a great exercise.
Yeah, right. Because again, I like to use a lot of metaphors because it kind of sticks in our minds, because we're using the other part of our brain when we're using creativity. So, yeah, and people remember that exercise forever, right? I'll use it with clients too because it really kind of sticks. So we're going to repeat those patterns of behavior. Now, our perception about that is that it's comfortable. Now, I use quotes because it's comfortable, but it actually isn't comfortable because it doesn't serve us well and it leads to our suffering. But it feels so, and that's why you see people repeat patterns of behavior all the time when it's not working for them. I mean, how many people end up dating the same type of person that's not healthy for them?
Mm.
How many people end up in situations where, like, how did that happen again? Huh? Like, what? How did I not catch that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because it's comfortable. It's because our brain repeats patterns of behavior because it's the path of least resistance. Our brain doesn't want to work hard. That's another thing.
Do you think it's also because we're supposed to learn something from is it kind of like, this is the way I see it at least, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. Is
Sure.
it kind of like a game, and to get to the next level or to unlock the next lesson, you have to learn what you're supposed to learn from that one? So like you said, people will repeat the same relationship just with a different person over and over and over again until they learn, and then they can evolve into the next one. Or I've met people who've gotten in
Mhm.
constant car accidents. I remember like they would always get in a car accident. Other people, they've never gotten one, but they probably should have, and things like that.
I think you're talking, I mean, to me, you're talking more about spirituality in some respects, you
I
know?
maybe a little
Yeah.
bit, but that's one
Yeah.
of the weeks, right?
Well, so I do believe things happen for a reason, so to speak. I do. And I do believe in signs, and I do see sometimes signs. And I'm a very intuitive, I happen to be a very intuitive person. I've had kind of thoughts about things, and they've actually happened. And it was scary, like some really scary stuff. So I do believe that. But I want to reframe it a little bit because not everybody believes in those kind of things.
I
So
would love that.
yeah, so just to reframe it, I think the way to think about it is that we have kind of stages of development, okay, from when we're kind of, let's say, young children, infants, etc., till our adulthood and late adulthood, okay? And yes, if you're growing and changing and learning, that's going to help you develop kind of, right, your self-actualized self. It's going to help you develop into a more cultivated person. The issue is that most of us live in our unconscious. Okay. So when you say a lesson, many of us don't have that level of insight and connection where we don't really, again, process and cultivate those lessons. Okay. So for example, I could tell you very specifically, okay, in my development, if I look at the men I've dated from, again, I started dating when I was like 13, believe it or not. And I had very like long-term relationships, 3 years, 6 years, etc. Right. If I look through my development, it is so super clear to me why I dated who I dated at the time I dated them, right? And what it lent to my development and where I was at during that time period. Okay. And I could also see the progression. I could see how I've cultivated myself in terms of my personal growth through my relationships. Okay. And, unfortunately, I, was married 25 years and very recently that relationship, you know, has ended or, you know, and I'm on my next journey, which is, again, this is something that's very personal, obviously, but I could I so understand, in such a deep way that path for myself, that journey. And it's a really difficult one, let me tell you. And I realize so much more now, right? What I need and what I want and what I deserve. Yeah, what I deserve, right? And it is such a different place. And I mean, I get sad sometimes, to be honest with you. I get really sad because, oh my gosh, I wish I had this insight like 30 years ago. Oh my gosh, I wish. But I wasn't in that place 30 years ago. And I couldn't be in that place because I learned from my circumstances and relationships. That's what got me here. So we have a lot of regrets. We sit with a lot of regrets. How did I not know? Why did I do this? Right? We kind of sit with a lot of regrets. I mean, I'll give you a really good example. I'm working with somebody, and this happens quite often, which is, sad. I'm working with somebody whose father died of cancer, and she is going through a lot of grief, bereavement, of course, because she had a very close relationship with her father. But one of the things that she can't get out of her mind that's really distressing to her is that she wished she spent more time with her father, especially before his death. Now, guess what? Before he died, she was in her 20s. Okay. She had a boyfriend. And when you're in your 20s and you have a boyfriend, all you're thinking about is socializing and you're thinking about being with your boyfriend. You're not thinking about being with your sick father. But even on top of that, if you think about it interpersonally and psychologically, she probably was in somewhat of denial that her father was as sick as he was and that he actually was going to die. Why? Because her brain was protecting her, right? So, of course, she wasn't going to be spending time with him because then she would have to accept his inevitable death. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it?
It
Right?
does.
We're talking
Yeah.
about it intellectually. She wasn't at that place at that time to be able to spend more time with him. It just wasn't possible. And she now, I'm working with her, but it's really about self-forgiveness and self-compassion and recognizing kind of the space she was at during that time period. And the suffering comes from wishing things were different, right? Because we
Mhm.
loop, our brain loops and loops because it doesn't want to be uncomfortable. And it also is protecting us that if this ever happens again, I'm not going to do the same thing
Right.
because I'll suffer again and I don't want to suffer. So there's so many things our mind does over and over again to try to protect us, right? It doesn't want us to repeat mistakes. And that is another thing that our mind does, right? So like, for example, I have so many people who come in, let's say whether they're in school and they have an exam or something they're working on, or they're in medical school and right, working towards a degree, or they're in business and working towards, a deal or whatever the case is. And they get so kind of, again, they're so hard on themselves and they get so anxious about it. Why? Their brain wants them to do well. And
Mhm.
it uses anxiety and it uses for motivation. Right. And I say to them, like, what would you be without your anxiety? What would you be without this? Like, I'm scared I won't, I'm scared that I'm not going to prepare for my presentation the way that I need to if I don't get like anxious. I was like, oh, really? So if I said to you, don't prepare, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You got this. Would you really not prepare? Really? Like you need to be so hyped up to prepare. Is that really what you need? They're like, no, oh my goodness. I was like, of course not.
Mhm.
But your brain doesn't believe that.
Mhm. Is feeling anxious and feeling nervous the same?
So yeah, I mean, I could talk from today until tomorrow about anxiety because that's one of my specialties. But anxiety is really about the way our brain, kind of reacts to stress, and there's all different kinds of ways our brain reacts, and it has to do with our thinking, the quality of our thoughts. So some people will overthink, some people worry, some people's minds race. I mean, I could go overthink, and on, ruminate. There's so many things. So when I talk about anxiety, I do a lot of psychoeducation about the way our brain works because people have a lot of misunderstandings about the utility of their anxiety. And it's really important to know that, because part of the problem with anxiety is we get a fear of the fear, and also the looping, so, once you feel the anxiety, you're scared you're going to feel it again. It becomes such a convoluted, intense experience that gets perpetuated over time. And I meet so many people, I cannot even tell you, that are misdiagnosed. That happens a lot. And I have so many people, when I really do their history and I talk about where they're at, it becomes so clear to me that this is not just something that happened yesterday or is circumstantial, which it could be. But when you go through history and I ask them, oh, you find out that they had signs and symptoms when they were kids, But what did they do? They either were shameful of it, so they ignored it, or they hid it and held it in secret, right? Either again, they used all these adaptations to cope with it, whether it was denying it or repressing it or, whatever the case is. And then what happens is through kind of development, it percolates. Like eventually it's a disaster because either there's a circumstances that evokes it, to that extent, the activation. It could be, I mean, it could be anything really. I had this person I was working with, very interesting. He was a very, very high powered, business person, finance person, and he did huge presentations, for all different corporations, banks, etc. And he would sit in a conference room with these really high powered individuals, and he never had an issue. Like he was confident, he was self assured. Well, one time, it just so happens that he took a flight, because he worked a lot out of internationally, etc. He took a flight, and it was like the perfect storm. He didn't sleep, right? He didn't get to eat. When he walked into the conference room, it was extremely, extremely hot. The temperature wasn't modulated in the conference room, etc. So he had a panic attack, like while he was giving the presentation. Now that could happen sometimes just because of, I told you, it's a perfect storm because physiologically he was just very off. His system was not regulated. And he had that reaction. Well, what do you think happened? Right? This is a guy who gave thousands of presentations, and his work is predicated on his presentation. That's how he gets deals. Okay. If he can't present, it's a big problem. Okay. And he came to me, he's like, this never happened to me. I don't know what to do. But again, when we went into his history, we saw that there was some, again, predisposition for it. There was predisposition, which he wasn't aware of. And then on top of it, all the physiological things that were going on for him in this specific circumstance. And then on top of that, it was the fear of the fear. Oh my goodness, it's going to happen again. Oh my goodness, it's going to happen. Or as soon as he felt the elevation in his body, right, and he became symptomatic, his brain is like, oh my God, it's going to happen again, right? So we had to really work on all of that. And we did, and he was good to go. Went back to the conference room, totally fine, you know?
And now I bet he'll never let that happen again.
Yes. And he's going to change his lifestyle, and he's going to do the things that I've shared with him and the skills that I've given him so that he can prepare, his mind and body's prepared, and he understands what that is, and he doesn't kind of jump to conclusions, etc.
Hmm. You've mentioned, by the way, this is fascinating and I could talk to you all day.
Yes, yes.
You have
And I can
mentioned
talk to you.
you've mentioned looping a few times now. Could you
Yes.
explain what that is exactly and what we can do about it?
Yes. Looping. So it's when we have thoughts about the thoughts, feelings about the thoughts, thoughts about the feelings, feelings about the thoughts. Okay, that's a big mouthful. um, our brain does so much. There's so much up here. I cannot even tell you, right? It's this like little this organ, this thing, but it does so much and it controls all of us. Okay. And the looping happens when, again, we keep on coming back to the same thing, right? Like, so when somebody overthinks, or somebody catastrophizes, right? We'll start out with my friend, I'll use the friend thing again, right? My friend doesn't like, my friend's angry at me. Um, she, she's disappointed in me. She's so disappointed in me that she never wants to talk to me again. She never wants to talk to me again. I'm a horrible friend. I'm such a horrible friend. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. I'm going to be stuck with no friends. I mean, it goes from like A to Z. And then by the time I'm down to, I'm going to have no friends, then I'm depressed, I'm anxious, right? And then it goes into, I'm not such a good friend and a whole other things, right? And then all the stimulus that I'm interacting with, guess what? It's cognitive dissonance. All the stimulus that I'm in contact with leads me to believe all of the narratives that I've developed and thinking I'm not a good friend and that no one's going to like me.
Because we look for proof, right, of our
Yeah.
beliefs.
Yes, exactly. That's the cognitive dissonance.
Mm,
Yes, we look for proof, right, in order, right, to validate these narratives we have about ourselves. And
mm.
guess what? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we want to look for that stimulus, it's there, I promise you. It's there, right? Another good example, I used this yesterday with one of my clients. I'll never forget this. I was at the gym, right? Because I'm a big gym. I used to be, I should say, but I do work out like 6 days a week. I was at the gym and I'm standing there. We're about to start a class. And I'm noticing, I just stood back. And I noticed everybody's like in little kind of groups talking and chatting and whatever. And I was standing there by myself. And I got like, all of a sudden, I got like this bout of insecurity. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm the only one here, like by myself. Everybody's talking. I'm the only one not talking to anybody. And then I'm like, of course, oh my gosh, does that mean like that no one wants to talk to me? Right. And then I got into like, maybe I should start talking to somebody. And then again, all of these like thoughts came into my mind. And then I'm like, Michelle, do you think anyone cares? Do you think anybody notices that you're standing there by yourself? Because they're busy talking to somebody else. Like you're not the queen of the planet and the universe that everyone should be looking at you and concentrating on you and thinking these things about you. Like, yes, you're wonderful, but come on, let's get off that like high horse.
Isn't it so funny how our brains do that? I mean, everyone is too worried thinking about themselves to be thinking about you.
And then I said to myself, this is a good challenging moment, right? I always said, grace for the mill. Let's just sit here and be anxious. Let's just sit here and be insecure. Good. Let's feel it. Let's see, this is like, again, against the emotional avoidance, right? Like working, kind of challenging yourself. Let's just be in it. Like, what does this feel like to be insecure? What does it feel like to have these set of thoughts? Right? What does it feel like in the body, in the mind, right? What is it prompting me to do? It's prompting me to go then talk to somebody. No, I'm okay. Like, I'm okay.
Mm.
Just because I'm not talking to somebody right now doesn't mean blank, 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 right? It just means I'm standing here by myself waiting for the class to start, period.
So don't assign meaning to it.
It's judgment. It's always judgment, judgment, judgment. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the looping too that happens, right? Because when we assign these judgments, and of course, we could be very, very judgmental towards ourselves and towards others all the time. I mean, who isn't, right? So noticing that, being in your body, like just feeling it, like walking through that, being with that. Mhm.
Okay, so we stop the looping by letting ourselves feel the emotions instead of thinking and overthinking on them.
Well, I just actually, that person who I told you about, this man who has these three young kids, he's going on a family trip, right? And he's like, I need tools. I need like right away, right? Because I just saw him one time. And I said to him, I actually felt so bad for him because when I spoke to him on the phone, he's like, I'm going on this family trip and I really want to be present with my kids. And like, there's a good chance, like, I'm so activated. I said, you know what, come in. Like, I literally saw him at like, a, egregious time at night just to get him in. And he's like, I said, we got to work on this. I said, however, you know, here are some tools. And so I'm gonna say there's an article that I wrote for Psychology Today. It's what to do when your mind spirals out of control. Basically, if you look up my name, you can kind of find that article. But it gives like 8 steps, like what you should do when your mind spirals out of control. One of the things that I want to emphasize, which is really important, and we don't practice this enough, which is really helpful, but it takes a lot of time and intentionality, is to not respond to our thoughts. Okay. I can't emphasize that enough. Very hard to do. It's challenging. But again, the more you practice it, the better you become at it. And you're training your mind to take those natural pauses that I talked about. Okay. And to notice and to reserve judgment, like we just said. Okay. So what happens is when we have these thoughts, we respond to them. And then another thought comes and we respond to that. And then another thought comes and we respond to that.
Could you give an example of what you mean by respond to the thought?
Sure, sure. So I'll just use that example again with the friend. Let's say my first thought is my friend is angry at me. Um, the friendship might be over or the friendship's over. Then I will respond and I will say, oh, the friendship's not over. We're friends for 10 years. We love each other. This is just conflict. Then my mind will say, oh no, no, this is different. This fight was like a lot bigger. Oh, I don't know what happened to the videos going a little wacky. Do you see that? Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I don't
I
know
can
what's
still
going
hear you perfectly though.
on. Okay, sorry about that. I feel like I'm in a disco or something, you know?
I feel like you're like AI.
Exactly. I don't know. Um, so instead of responding, because our mind is going to up the ante, because it wants to keep you in a fearful state so that you don't just give up, right? Because if you don't work hard on the friendship, you're going to lose it, right? That's what your brain thinks. So we can't just let go of the anxiety. Like it has to kind of sustain itself. So when you respond, your mind's going to respond. So, oh no, 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 this is different. Like this is a really horrible fight. Like this is really going to lead. Oh no, like our friendship is so solid. Like nothing's going to happen to it. Like that's impossible, you know? And again, it's back and forth and back and forth. So instead, what you want to do is just notice, oh, I'm having the thought that the friendship is going to end, that the friendship is threatened and compromised, right? Okay. Oh, you know what? Of course I'm having that thought because friendships are really important to me and I take my friendships very seriously. And this friendship, this person means a lot to me. And I'm, fearful that something could happen that could jeopardize this friendship. Wow. Self-compassion. When I'm in this situation, when I feel like my friendships are compromised, I get really fearful. And that's because I care so much. I really care, right? And then you may like, let's say, do a self-compassion exercise, right? And you may like put your arms around, right? And give yourself a hug and say, yeah, I'm struggling right now. This is hard. This is really hard for me right now. Like, I really love her. I really want to repair things with her. She really means a lot to me. Like gentleness,
Hmm.
calmness, non-judgmental, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
then you could problem solve and you can make decisions from an intentional, mindful, practical, right? Prefrontal cortex place, which is where you want to make your decisions. Yeah.
that's beautiful. I love bringing together the emotional aspect with the logic and
Mhm.
intertwining that and being able to approach situations from
Mhm.
that space. I mean, that's key. And I know throughout this entire conversation, you've been dropping golden nuggets that the listeners can use. But do you have one that maybe you keep in your back pocket, some type of tangible tool that someone can use
Uh-huh.
in this moment if they're feeling any type of uncomfortable emotion?
Emotion. Really think about the utility of the emotion. In other words, why it's important to you, what value it's connecting to. Because instead of, again, being harsh with ourselves and being judgmental, it brings you to a place to actually appreciate, right? And to tap into your wholeness and goodness. Because all of us have worth, all of us have goodness, basic goodness. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves of that. Yeah. Right? Because sometimes we lose sight of that because of the world we live in, because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. All of us, right? Like, Buddhist precepts say life is full of human suffering. We all have our thing. Nobody is, unscathed. So we really need to be gentle. We need to be kind. We need to be compassionate and caring towards ourselves. I can't like say that enough.
Yes. I have one more question for you, but before
Uh-huh.
I ask it, where could people find more from you?
Sure. So I have my book that's out. It's called, I'll show you. And again, this Technology. It's called Ace Your Life, Unleash Your Best Self and Live the Life You Want. I'm very excited because actually I'm just starting to do my audiobook, finally. So
Ah,
that's really exciting. I'm so, so excited. Yeah. It will hopefully be done, and I'm recording it myself, which I'm
okay.
also, yeah, which I'm really excited about too. I really want that connection with, people who read it. I feel like that's so important to me because I really love what I do, and I have that passion, and I want to connect with other people. Um, so that's going to probably be done, I would say, by like late, spring or so. Again, my YouTube channel, you could get my weekly guided meditations. They're recorded and published every Thursday morning at like about 11 a.m. And again, I'm a Psychology Today blogger. You could, of course, my website is a great place because it has all of my information, but that's my full name, Michelle with two L's, and Maidenberg is Maidenberg.com.
Amazing. And all of that will be in the description, of course. I love that you are recording the audiobook yourself. Whenever I listen to an audiobook, I definitely
Uh-huh.
enjoy it more whenever the author is the one reading it.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, my final question for you.
Yes.
What
Yes.
is your number one health tip, whether it's mindset, diet, and nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you would like everyone in the world to know?
Wow. It's around mindfulness. It's taking moments of pause. That's what it is. And you know what? That responds to all of the things that you just said. That helps fundamentally in every single way, literally.
Mm,
Life goes by, because of the work I do, okay? And because of the suffering that I witness on a daily basis. And again, I could just share with you in a day, in a span of what I witness. And it is a lot of suffering, which you could imagine, right?
mm,
How we don't take moments to just be and to have gratitude and to notice all the wonders of the world, whether it's nature, relationships, like everything. And sometimes it's too late. Yeah. So just to pause, take 1 minute in your day, literally 1 minute to just stop and to
mm.
notice. That's it. Yeah.
Such a great one. Thank you so much, Michelle
Sure.
Maidenberg, ladies and
Yes.
gentlemen. And it was a pleasure speaking with you. I look forward to seeing what's next from you,
Thank
and
you.
make sure to check out all of her links in the description.
Thank you. It was so nice talking to you.